Hi again, everyone. It's 1:10. Over the morning, the Etherpad's been fixed. Julian got in touch with the people who run the VM for it, and that's been restarted. So he's put the link there. We talked about this just before lunch, but if you want to open that link, you can now take a look at it. I put a little bit of information in there. Just with some details on running jobs, which we'll need, in particular the session after the next one, when we'll be running jobs on Slurm. Just some details about how to charge the jobs and also how to use the reservation for those of you who will want to try that. So it may be worthwhile just taking a quick look at that, or at least bearing in mind that it's there. I'll reference it when we get to that point, certainly. Okay then, I should get sharing my screen again then, and then we can get going with the development environment on ARCHER2. Here we go. Okay. Okay, I hope you can see that okay. So on the left, again, I've got the material on the right terminal. I'll show some of this material in the terminal as we go through it. I think it's handy seeing it in action, so to speak. Okay, so we're going to be talking in this session about what does the development environment look like, how you use the different parts of it, how you find out what software is available, how you can share that environment with others, and at the end, how you can get help with doing all of this. Okay, so those of you who have used HPC systems before, and I think most but not all of you have, so I'll try to keep this accessible for people who haven't. You may have used software modules before. So when you're, say, working on your own machine, if it's a Linux machine, you probably just use the software that's made available through the operating system package manager. You've asked for it to say to install HDF5, and so it will install HDF5 in your /user/lib or lib64 directory probably, and you'll just go ahead and use that. When you're working on an HPC cluster like our ARCHER2, we go a different route instead. We don't make defaults like that and just put them in the system-wide directories, because people will have different requirements. Some people will want to use certain versions of certain libraries, and they will want to use certain versions of certain compilers with them. They'll want to use certain versions of MPI. There are many more options to consider, and we need to make sure that everyone on the system is able to access and use the options that they want. And this means that we end up using what are called environment modules, software modules. This is a command line tool that you use when you log in, and you can use it to change which software you use, which compilers, which libraries, which versions. And it has to, of course, by design, be fairly simple to use. You have to be able to swap this quickly depending on what you want to do. Maybe you want to check that your software builds with one version of a compiler, and then you need to quickly go and check that it works with another version. So it has to be quick and simple to use. We use a particular version of this module system called LMOD. So this is based on the Lua programming language. Maybe you've heard of or used Lua before. So this means the tool is called LMOD, and that provides access to these different modules. At the moment, there are certain software modules available with certain versions. These have already changed since the ARCHER2 service started, and there will be more changes in the future. And finally, yes, they're provided mainly by two different groups of people, by HPE Cray, who just provide the software along with the cluster, and also by us at the ARCHER2 CSE team. So on the right, I've got my terminal again. I haven't done any, I haven't made any changes to the module since I logged in. So the first thing we're going to ask is what modules are loaded when we log into Architude. This basically means what software is available for use at the point that you log into Architude. So everyone will, when they log in, get a default set of modules loaded. And these provide most of the very basic functionality. So for a lot of people, actually, this may be all that they need. So when you log in, you'll find that the Cray compilers, remember this is referred to as the CC, the Cray compiler environment, these are loaded and available for you to use. There's also the Cray MPI library, the Cray libsci libraries, these provide BLAS, LaPack, ScalarPack, and also what we'll talk about tomorrow, the Cray Pat Lite. This is a lightweight performance toolkit. It's also loaded at login. On top of that, there are a good number of modules which we don't really need to worry about, but which help the other modules to work. So to find out what those modules actually are, we can use the module list command, just as it's written here. So I can do that on the right. I'm just going to move back to my work directory to shift the prompt over a bit. So if I type module list, and I've done nothing other than log in here, then press enter, I'll be told which modules are loaded. You should see, I think the versions of everything here that I've got in my output match everything here on the left. But this is just saying, at the moment, we've got 13 modules loaded. Some of them are fairly self-explanatory. We've talked about, here are the Cray compilers, CCE version 11.0.4. This means we've got version 11.0.4 of the Cray compilers. Cray PE, we'll talk a little about that later on. These are really these sort of system modules that support the other modules, libfabric. The ones which we really care about here are the versions of the CCE compilers. Here's the version of the Cray npitch install and of the Cray libsci install. These are the important things. So this means that by default, when you log in, you're ready to go with the Cray compilers. There's also Cray MPI loaded, and you're good to go with things like LaPack if you want to use that through Cray libsci. What you can do if you say, if you change some modules and you want to go back to the default, well, one thing you can do is you can use module restore. Just type module restore and then press enter. And you may see some changes. This is a little slow at the moment, I should say. If there are any of you trying this yourselves, you might see it's not entirely responsive, and I think there is something happening with the file system at the moment that the systems team should be looking into. So things are a little bit laggy just now. As you can see, this should be instant. I should have typed module restore, and almost instantly it should have made whatever changes are needed and then got me back to the prompt, but that took a few seconds. Julian's, sure, Julian, what is it?
Yeah, I wanted to ask real quick, do you know which file system you're on?
I think it's 2.
Okay. I'll ping system and find out what's.
Yes, it's 2. Sure. Yeah, that could be helpful. Thanks. Yeah. Okay. So yes. So that means that that will always take us back to this setup. If you make some more drastic changes to your setup, so I hadn't changed anything there. I was running module restore with the default modules anyway. If you move away quite a lot from the default modules, you might get another message saying you can source a particular script to run, which will take everything back to default. if you do get that message, it's just a matter of copying and pasting it and running it. Something, of course, you can also do if you really do change the modules so much that things are falling apart, it is possible that you might have to work at it, is to just log out and log back in again, and that will bring you back to the default. So that's always a fallback if you do need to return to this. Okay, so we've seen what modules we have when we log in, and we found out about the module list command to find out at any point. You can run this at any point to see what modules do we have loaded just now. Now we want to find out what software can we load. So what non-default software can we load and use? And that's done through the module avail command. So this is actually short for module available. You can actually run module available. I will do this, but really most of the time people just write module avail because it's much faster. So if we run module avail, it's a little bit less typing to do. See, the file system is a little laggy because, again, this should be nearly instant. Apologies for this. Hopefully, whatever the issue is on the back end, they can sort it out quickly. Okay, here we go. So module avail has run, and now we've got a list of new software which we can load and use if we want. And actually, there are some differences. So on the left, I think this is output I copied, I think, in January. So it looks like since January, we've already got 3 new Python modules here. So this is just a list of every module which we can load and run at the moment. I say load and run at the moment because that's important to bear in mind. I'll talk about why in a minute or two. But this is everything which we can do module load on just now to make available. So we've got some Python packages up here, if we want those. Then we've got some scientific and numerical packages: Adios, Boost, Eigen, GSL, Hyper, MKL's installed if you want to try using MKL. This is all software which has been installed by us in the Arch2 CSC team at EPCC. So this isn't Cray software. This is post-installed software that we've made available to users. With this screen up, you can press the up and down arrow keys to go through it, or you can press the space bar to go through it a bit quicker. I believe up should work as well. U for up will also bring you back up. So there are the libraries. Then here are the simulation tools, simulation packages: Cassette, Code, Saturn, CP2K, VASP at the bottom. And then some more things, some more utilities: NCL, CDO, PowerView, Reframe. And then we move on to the Cray installed software, to the software from HP Cray. So here are the things like the system installs of Cray HDF5 Parallel. You'll see that a lot of the Cray software, you get the paths to the modules here. They begin with opt Cray. That means it's a Cray installed thing. Most of them begin with the word Cray dash and then whatever the package is. Some of them don't. So perf tools, which we'll be talking about tomorrow, is Cray software. Cray MPitch ABI, Cray MPitch, these are. And these go on. There are lots and lots of tools available, which are all here. I guess I can show you. So something interesting to note here. Some of the modules have D's after them in brackets, and some of them have L's, which you can see here is also in yellow. If it's a yellow L, that means that we have that module loaded at the moment. And if you remember, when we did module list, we saw that Cray MPitch 8.1.4 was loaded. So this means we've got this module loaded for use at the moment. If we wanted, we could change it to cray mpitch 8.1.9 instead. We'll talk about how to do that, but for now, we have this one. Some of them have also got this A, that means that that's the default module. So that means if you were to tell the module system to load cray mpitch without a cray mpitch loaded at the moment, it would load this one by default if you don't specify a version name, that is. So if you just say, I want cray mpitch, it will give you the default. If you specify it with the version, it will then give you that one. Oops. Okay, and then you should be able to press Q to get out of that as well, except that the file system is very laggy and making things a little tricky. So there's a lot of software listed. Some of it will be self-explanatory. If you want to use a particular version of VASP, then obviously you will just load that particular version of VASP. If you spot a module and you aren't sure what it is, there are a few tools that you can use to help you a little. You can use module help, except I can't even do that because it's so laggy. But you can do module help and then give the name of a module. So in the example in the material here, I'll try and use this just because of how laggy the system is just now. If we have module help and then the name of a module, in this example, cray mpitch, it will provide some output that's defined in the module itself to tell you a little about it. In the case of cray mpitch, it just tells you about the copyright license. And then finally, some more actual information about what it actually does. So this is actually useful. It tells you that cray mpitch 8.1.9 is derived on mpitch 3.4a2, but it's got some cray modifications to work on an HP cray EX system like ARCHER2. And then there'll be more information you can scroll through if you want. Another command is module info, might also tell you something useful about the module if you want to know more. So we've seen how to check the modules we have at the moment. That's the module list command. We'd find this output. If we found a module that we want to use, we can then use the module load command. So something that isn't loaded by default is cray FFTW. That just provides a version of FFTW modified by HP cray to run particularly well, I guess, on ARCHER2, made to use their hardware the best way it can. So if you had some software that you wanted to build and you wanted it to build against FFTW, you could just go ahead and use the cray FFTW software that's on there, and you do that by running module load cray FFTW. And at that point, you would be able to check again with module list. Before, we only had the 13 modules loaded. After loading cray FFTW, we would then see the 14th module has been loaded, and that is cray FFTW. What we didn't do here, when we did module load cray FFTW, was we didn't specify a version. So it's gone ahead and loaded the default, which is 3.3.8.9. If we had said, say, which versions of cray FFTW are there? Let's see if this is. Nope, still very laggy. It's a shame. I want to show you this. What you can do is you can just type module avail and then say cray module avail cray FFTW. Let's see if I can get this at all. So I've just tried typing that into the terminal, but it's not coming up. I think it's a little bit of a lost cause at the moment, to be honest.
So from the looks of it, part of the problem is the load on work file system 1, which is where all of the modules are kept.
Okay, right, that would make sense. Okay.
Systems in HPE are investigating. If you want, I can submit a query to say that it's unusable.
It very nearly is, isn't it? Would you be happy to do that, Julian?
I'll send one.
Okay, great. Cheers. Thank you. Yeah, we really do want this to be working for all of you at the moment. Okay, so although you couldn't see it, I typed in the command module avail cray-fftw and pressed enter. And that will just tell me which versions of Cray FFTW can I load at the moment. And that's told me that I can load 3.3.8.9, which is the default, and 3.3.8.11. So if you do module load Cray FFTW, it will only give you that default module. If you want to, yeah, I'm trying to load it, but without being able to see what I'm typing, it's a little tricky. It seems I missed a C at the beginning of Cray FFTW. Trying to do as best as we can with the system as it is. If you were to get one of the Cray FFTW modules loaded, you would then be able to do module unload Cray FFTW, and that would remove it from your current environment. Or if, on the other hand, if you wanted to, I'll just bring this over again, make it a little bit bigger for you all. If you wanted to change your current version of Cray FFTW for a specific version, so say we're back at the point where we've got 3.3.8.9 loaded in our environment, if we do module list, and we decide, no, we don't want to build against version 3.3.8.9, we want to use instead 3.3.8.11, we could use the module swap command. We'd say module swap Cray FFTW for Cray FFTW / 3.3.8.11. This basically combines a module unload with a module load. So it's going to first of all do module unload Cray FFTW. At that point, we'll only have one Cray FFTW loaded, and that's this one. So it's just going to unload it. And then it's going to load specifically version 3.3.8.11. So hopefully you can see the advantages of using a module system like this. It lets you very quickly change which software you want to use. You could build something against using a very specific version of some library, and then just run a single command to change the version, and then you can rebuild again with that new version of the library. And then just the same way we can change which compilers we use and everything else in the environment very quickly using these modules. This is maybe too hopeful for me. Yeah, that's completely unusable at the moment, which is very annoying, but for the time being, we'll have to make do. I wonder if it would help at all if I logged out and back in again, or is that too hopeful for me? So there I am at my terminal again. I'll attempt to log back in just to see if anything at all changes, though that's probably extremely hopeful of me. Because I really would like to show you this. Yes, that's no improvement. Okay, so we'll just carry on with the material here as is. Oh, hi Julian, yes, sure.
Yeah, I was going to suggest the things you're showing you could probably also show on Cirrus, like maybe not the query relevant stuff,
That isn't a bad idea. Um, Unfortunately, Cirrus doesn't have Elm hubs, so hierarchical modules wouldn't work there. Um, let's see. We could just try Cirrus. Yeah, why not? Why not? It does work in the end. It's just that we should be this should be near instant, and other people are reporting slowdowns. So there is something that there's some ongoing incident on the system with the file system. It seems. Junior, you said it was home one or work one, oh, file system one. So oh, okay, so it's instant for you. It might depend on where you're. Let's see, because I can try. Maybe I could try. Oops, not Archer2. I can try my other accounts in case they're on a different file system and maybe a bit faster. This seems just as slow. I'm trying to log into my regular account at the moment, which has seen enough use that there shouldn't be any issues if it is any caching. But this seems just as slow. We'll see anyway. Pushing on just while that starts up. Oh, here we go. Okay, so this seems better. Okay, I wonder which file system I'm on here. Home 2 again. Very odd. If it is the cache being created, again, that should be instant, essentially. I'll carry on with this account. So this isn't a TA062 account, but everything here about modules is still the same. So still got the default set of loaded modules. I can still do module load cray FFTW, and I'll then, again, this is still taking a little longer than it should do. And that will then load it. And we'll then be able to swap it out or unload it or do whatever else we want. There's also this convenience command. I can just show you this now quickly, ml. So if I just type ml without any arguments and press enter, that does the same thing as module list. Or I can give it an argument, which is the name of a module, and then that turns it into module load. So I can do module load, let's see, I can do module load cray HDF5, say. And in a moment, that should show that HDF5 has been loaded. I'm not sure that many people are aware of this and use it. Everyone defaults, I think, to module list and module load. So if I just run ml again, you can now see that we've got the default version of cray HDF5 loaded. I can do module avail, cray HDF5, see whichever versions are available. And then swap those in and out however we want, really. At least at some point in the near future. So hierarchical modules, something specific to LMOD, and I really would have liked to show you this, but I think we'll be able to go through. Okay, oh, here we are. Okay, yes, so we can swap CreHDF5, this version, for this version if we want to. It doesn't really matter. I will, however, go back to the default environment. I'll use module restore, and that'll take me back to the default environment at login without FFTW or HDF5 loaded. So hierarchical modules are perhaps a little weird, even if you've used other module systems before. It's a system that changes the module that you load in the background, depending on which other modules you've already got loaded. The reason for this is that some software packages, as you know, will have dependencies on other software packages. So if you're using a particular version of some package, you may find that you can only use particular versions of another package. So the example that we're going to look through here is with the Cray netcdf module. So if we were to try and find Cray netcdf using module avail, so we would just do module avail Cray netcdf, then we would be able to see which versions of Cray netcdf can we load at the moment. And we would find that it's actually going to come back and tell us that we can't load any versions of netcdf at the moment, which is a little weird because, well, the Cray netcdf software has been installed. It's there on the system for us to use. But just with module avail, it won't tell us anything about it. And the reason is that sort of little clause I added on a few minutes ago, where I said that module avail will show you which modules are available to be loaded at the moment. So the reason that module avail won't show us anything about Cray netcdf is because Cray netcdf isn't available to be loaded at the moment. And the reason for that is essentially that it doesn't know how to load it, because Cray netcdf has as a dependency Cray HDF5. So until some version of HDF5 has been loaded, the module system doesn't know how to choose a version of netcdf. We have to choose first a version of Cray HDF5, and then the module system will go, oh, you want to use this version of HDF5? Right, in that case, you'll want that install of netcdf. So sometimes you won't want to run module avail to find out which modules are on the system. Sometimes instead you'll want to run module spider. And it's a little weird, a name perhaps, module spider. You're wondering, what do spiders have to do with anything? It's sort of like when you run module spider, it's sort of following a web of everything, and it's going to work out everything that's available, this time searching for every module there is, and it's then going to work out what web of dependencies, if you like, are needed to load any module that's necessary. So I'll try it in hope I'm the right. Spider Cray netcdf. Let's see what it tells us. And I'll clear that. And that's probably going to take a long time to run. Oh, okay, that isn't too bad actually. That was fairly quick. So so module spider Cray netcdf will find any and all versions of Cray netcdf on the system and say these are there. Whereas if I've done module avail, Cray netcdf, it only comes up with these two modules, which aren't anything that we need to worry about just now. I think they were installed for some weird compatibility issues someone was having, but these aren't what we want to install. What we want is just Cray netcdf, and module avail Cray netcdf hasn't shown us anything at all about it. So you can also just run module spider without anything, and then it will just list every single module there is, whether it can actually be loaded or not. So what we found out is that although modular veil tells us nothing about Cray netcdf, module spider has told us that there are 2 Cray netcdf modules installed. But we still don't know how to actually load them. If we just do, I'll just show you, for example, if we just try to do module load Cray netcdf 4.7.4.3, it's not going to work. In a second. And the reason is, as I say, the LMOD system at this point doesn't know how to load it. There are some missing dependencies. Here we go. It's told us that the module exists. In fact, it actually gives us some really helpful advice here, which is the next step for us to do. It's told us that the module exists, but it cannot be loaded as requested. And then it's giving us a suggestion, try module spider Cray netcdf 4.7.4.3 to see how to load it. And that's exactly what we're going to try to do. So if we do module spider Cray netcdf, and that's our version 4.7.4.3, and you could try the other version as well and it would work just the same way. Just run module spider on that. And now it's telling us you will need to load all modules on any one of the lines below before the module is available to load. So we need to pick one of these lines and make sure that we have all of these modules loaded first. First column are all compilers. There are 2 sets of AMD compiler versions, 2 installs for the Cray compilers, and then a good few versions of the Cray, sorry, the GCC compilers. And you can see also on the right-hand column, so for these 2, for the 2 Cray compiler lines, it's saying we also need to load one of these 2 versions of Cray HDF5. So if we do ML, say module list, well, we can see we've already got Cray compiling environment 11.0.4 loaded. So that's this module. We've got this module loaded. So what we're missing is one of the Cray HDF5s. So if we load, let's just say we'll load this version, Cray HDF5 1.12.0.3. Okay, we'll just use ML as another example. So we're going to load that. That's a little slower again. Oh, yeah, that's the exact same one loaded here in the material. At that point, whenever this does happen, at that point the LMOD system will go, oh, okay, there's Cray HDF5. That's one of the requirements for Cray netcdf. At that point, Cray netcdf becomes loadable. And so it will show up if we do a modular veil, Cray netcdf, whereas before it didn't appear, now it will appear. And we can also go ahead at that point and load it. Before that gave us the error. At this point, we've loaded all of the dependencies. We've got the CCE 11.0.4 module loaded, and we'll have the Cray HDF5 module loaded. It will have no issues picking out how to load Cray netcdf, and it will load it, and we can then go ahead and use it. So really, everything here comes down to this hint here. I do think this is a little weird if you aren't used to hierarchical modules, but I think it's important to just remember this because it does ultimately make sense. It does ultimately work. If you are expecting a module to be available on the system, but you can't find it in modular veil, instead try searching for it with module spider. So just like when we did module spider Cray netcdf, and that will then show you which versions are available. Then try running module spider with a particular version of that module, and then it will show you what you need to have loaded in order to load that module. You then know what the dependencies are. You can load those modules or any of those modules which you don't already have loaded. And at that point, you'll be able to load and use the one that you do care about. I think there aren't actually a great many modules with dependencies like this on the system. I think the main one that people are likely to run into is actually CRAYNet CDF, which is why I chose to use it here for this run through of how it works. So if any of you have software which depends on Net CDF, when it comes to building it, don't panic if you find that you can't load the module. Just remember, module spider's here, and it's going to tell us that in order to use CRAYNet CDF, we have to first load a version of Cray HDF5, and only then can we load and use NetCDF. Okay, does that make sense for everyone at this point? I'd like to check everyone's happy with this before we move on, because it is a little weird, I know. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions coming through. But again, if something comes to mind through the rest of today, or maybe overnight in a dream, if you dream about these things, sometimes I do, which is very sad, I know. Please do take an opportunity today or tomorrow to ask about it. Okay. So. So switching between, actually, let me just check. Okay, we do talk about it later on. Okay, that's good. Okay, so we've spoken now about generally changing modules and hierarchical modules. Everything we've done so far has all been using the Cray compilers. This, dare I try this? ML, yes, it works. Using CCE 11.0.4 Cray compilers. Haven't said anything about using the other compilers or even different versions of other compilers. Probably the easiest place to get started, of course, when you're porting code is to try using GCC. I imagine probably most all of you are using GCC. Everyone really writes their code for GCC standards, I suppose you might call them. So it's often the place you want to get started out. So when you first move your code onto ARCHER2 and you want to try building it, you want to use the GCC compilers. To swap between them, it isn't just a case of swapping out CCE 11.0.4 for one of the GCC modules. That will probably not work. And you might find that some of the other modules will break. So what Cray provides are what they call these programming environments. And they're these modules which all begin progenv dash something. So I should be able to do module avail progenv, and that's worked, thankfully. So we've got progenv AOCC with one version, AOCC another version, Cray with 2 versions, and GNU with 2 versions. And well, we can see that this one actually is loaded at the moment. We can check that in our ML, and we'll see when we did ML just a second ago, indeed, progenv Cray 8.0.0 is loaded. So if you want to change to a different compiler suite, so move from Cray to GNU or AMD or back again, the way to do it is actually to load a different programming environment module. So we would do module load plugenv GNU, and after some time that will produce a couple of messages, which we'll see here, where lmod is going to swap out some modules for other modules, and then it's going to do a little bit of magic. There we go, we're getting the messages now. It's going to do a little bit of magic, in particular with the cray mpitch modules. So when we change the plugenv module, it's going to swap out the right versions of the compiler modules for the right versions there. It's going to change that. And then it's going to actually change some of the internals, if you like, of the cray mpitch module, and it's going to tell it to use a version of the mpitch. It's going to change the paths to the libraries to use versions of cray mpitch which were built for use with the GCC compilers rather than the cray compilers. That's why if you just swap out CCE for GCC, it probably won't work. So if you just change plugenv cray to plugenv whichever other plugenv you want to use, that will fix everything for you. And at that point, the environment is set up to use, in this case, the GCC compilers. If you wanted to use the AMD compilers, then you would be able to just do module load and one of the plugenv ones instead. Sometimes you might also see people doing module swaps. You might see people doing module swap plugenv cray, plugenv GNU. I actually tend to do that most of the time. You don't need to, but I think it's just nice to be a little more explicit in the command, showing that you're unloading the first plugenv module and loading the second. Yes, so then here we are, back to the thing. Something else you may want to do, not everyone will, but you may want to change the versions of your compilers as well. So I've mentioned that we've got these three modules which actually provide the compilers, but you'll generally do the plugenvs to do it. So what you could do, so if I just do ml actually quickly, we'll see that we've currently got loaded. Now that I've done the module load plugenv GNU, I've now got GCC 10.2.0 loaded. But if I do module avail GCC, I'll see that there are actually a few versions of GCC available. So if we wanted 11.2.0 rather than 10.2.0, as we have loaded at the moment, we could just do, as we've got here, we could just do module swap GCC 11.2.0. And for a lot of the cray software that might work, but I would caution in general against this. Some paths, some things hidden away may not work. Instead, what I would do is I would change a whole programming environment release. So the compilers are provided as part of what's called a cray programming environment. That's just referred to as CPE. So every CPE release, which generally come out with versions of year, month, provide the plugenvs with the compilers, with mpitch, with libsci, with HDF5, with netcdf. All of that comes bundled together as a CPE release. And within a CPE release, everything is guaranteed to work together. So if you ARCHER2 and you find that you probably in particular want to, if you want to use a particular version of something, I would say probably the best way to guarantee success, although it's not, it may work without doing this, but I just think this is a more guaranteed method, is to use a complete coherent CPE release. So we don't have any way of knowing it at the moment, but the default environment, the default software, if you just swap things around, is CPE release 21.04. So that's actually April last year. But there is a newer version, 21.09, also available. So if I wanted to use GCC 11.2.0, if I wanted to have, cutting edge compilers and everything, at least as available on ARCHER2, I wouldn't just swap out 10.2.0 for 11.2.0. Instead, I would swap to the new CPE release, and I'll do that by running module load CPE, CPE 21.09, like so. And that will actually change a good few modules. So this will not just change the version of GCC, it's also going to change the version of, well, let's see what we have loaded. It's going to change probably most of the versions here. Cray HDF5 will change. It's going to use a new version of progenv GNU. It's going to probably change the mpich and libsci versions as well. I think the libfabric version is unchanged, not that we ever really need to worry too much about that ourselves. Yeah, but the important things are it's going to change the GCC, mpich, HDF5, etc. versions. Oh yeah, here we go. It's done it, and we can see, yes. So we've got the new versions of all of this software. We can see we've also swapped from GCC 10.2.0 to 11.2.0. And if we do ML, we'll see all of that. So this is by far the best way to get a whole change in your environment, changing the versions of everything to the whole complete new CPE release. At the moment, these are the two versions which we have on ARCHER2, but we will be installing more. Well, I think perhaps HPE will be installing more. I'm not sure whether it falls on us or them to install that. Something which is a little weird is when you do this, you do need to run one final command, this export LD library path, and we just change LD library path to add another environment variable, cray LD library path, at the beginning of it. And that makes sure that everything links against these new non-default libraries. It's unfortunately a little difficult sometimes to remember to do that, but that's the final step that you do need to do. The reason for that is that the linking on ARCHER2 is dynamic, but uses run paths. So we need this to override any defaults. We'll talk a little about that in a second, but not in too much detail. So I would like to talk about this. I'll maybe show an example as well. I think that would be good. Let's see if this is any better. Okay, let's see. So I'm back here on my TA062 account, and I'm going to move into my work directory. Okay, because I'd like to show you how to build some simple codes at least. We'll build more codes tomorrow for the debugging and profiling sessions, but I'd like to just show you how to build a hello world, I guess, at the moment. So compiler wrappers. This is where things again are quite different on ARCHER2. Well, on Cray systems in general from other clusters, I'll say, made by other vendors, because the compilers themselves are part of this big ecosystem of software modules that HPE Cray provide. So when you're building code on ARCHER2, you in general would not ever use GCC, say, or gfortran. You wouldn't ever call the compilers themselves directly, which may sound very odd, There are a few edge cases where you would do so, but they really are edge cases. Almost all the time, you would not ever use GCC, G4tran, etc. directly. And part of that is, well, we have all of these modules. We'll just take a look again. So this is again on my other account. So we've got the default modules set up, and we've got all these things. We've got the cray libsci, cray mpitch. You know, I can module load cray ffTW. All this very specific software. Oops, sorry, just a second. I just need to grab a quick drink quickly. Okay, sorry about that. Yes, we've got all these very particular modules loaded, all providing very specific software. We've got these extra modules like libfabric and crayp network, OFI, crayp x86 Rome. These are all setting up options and environment variables and libraries to link to and header files to include that are altogether pretty complex. So HP Cray provides compiler wrappers that deal with all of the linking for that automatically. So we don't need to worry about which pieces of software are located where and how we need to use them. So so the example here is that cray libsci is loaded by default. We can see it right here. It provides BLAS, LAPACK, SCALAPACK. They're all there, and we don't need to worry about how to link it. The compiler wrappers that HP Cray provide will deal with that automatically. And if we change the version of cray libsci, it will change automatically to work still. And we can do this with any of the with any of the cray software here, whether it's libsci or mpitch or ffTW or HDF5. And the wrapper scripts that we want to use, they're always the same. It doesn't matter which programming environment you're using, whether it's Cray or GCC or AOCC. You'll always use FTN to build Fortran code, CC lowercase for C code, and CC uppercase for C++ code. You can use that to compile anything, whether serial codes or parallel codes. And yes, as I said, you will never really call GCC or G4tran directly. So just to demonstrate this to you, maybe I shouldn't have. Let's make a directory, and I'll just call it hello. I'll cd into hello, and then I'm just going to write hello.f90. And let's just write a really small, you know, the most basic of basic hello world codes in Fortran. I'm going to include implicit none because I feel like I would be betraying myself if I didn't, even for this small program. There we go, hello world, very simple. It does nothing but print that. Okay, so I've just written that. ML, remember, we've got, we're in plugenv cray. This everything here is default except I loaded cray ffTW. So to build that code, I would just do ftn hello.f90-o hello. If I look there I've got hello, and it runs as expected. If I do ftn --version, we'll see it's telling me that's cray Fortran version 11.0.4. If I wanted to build that with GCC, well, G4tran, I guess, instead, then I'll just do module load plugenv GNU. Give that a minute to work out what it's doing. and at that point, I would be able to build it again, but this time it would use Gfortran to do it rather than the Cray Fortran compiler. It's nearly there. I think it's just working out now. Any other modules it needs to fix to work with to work in the GCC environment rather than the Cray environment. How are we doing for time, actually? I think we're doing okay. Yes, we're doing fine for time, I think. Okay, here we go. So I can just do the same thing again. ftn hello.f90-o hello, and I can run that just same as before. That's because I've got, let me just do module unload Cray fdw. Okay. Okay, there we go. And again, hello./hello will run. But if I do ftn-version, I'll get some different output telling me that this time it's actually GNU Fortran 10.2.0. And again, I could swap, I could do module load progenv AOCC, and just the same thing would happen again. I would run ftn, except this time it would use the AMD compiler. So this is something really important, I think, to remember, that in almost all cases, 99.9% of cases, code that you're building on ARCHER2 or any other Cray system should be using the ftn, cc, and capital CC compiler wrappers. If you don't, there is a chance that things will not be linked in correctly. And also, to be honest, while it's a little weird to get at first, if you're not used to something like this, I think it does. I think it does work. It makes making use of all the Cray software very easy, I think, once you're used to it. You may need to make some changes to any build scripts you use, or you may need to set some environment variables beforehand. Most of the time, this means doing things like setting the CC environment variables and MPI CC environment variables, or just passing them to the configure stage in a configure make install type build. It does also mean that that if you are if your build system, for whatever reason, needs to be told the specific flags, say, to use to link BLAS or something in, you can essentially skip those. You can leave those fields empty and just rely on the compiler wrappers to link it in, because they're doing it automatically for you. You can also check the compiler wrapper man pages, so you can just do man ftn. Again, the man command gives you the manual, and you can go down and check all the options. That's particularly useful, I think, for the Cray compilers, because they use options that are a little different from the GCC type options you might be familiar with if you want to try using the Cray compilers. And you can access, so if you do say man ftn, that gives you the help for the compiler wrapper. If you want to check the options specifically for the underlying compiler itself, oops, of course that won't work. If I go back to module load plugin Cray, then I would be able to do that. Oops, nope, because it's not plugin CRAT, it's plugin Cray. Yeah, so once if you want to check the man pages for the compilers specifically and not the compiler wrappers, you would look up, say, CRAY-CC and CRAY-FTN. This something else I want to note just quickly, in case you do want to try out the Cray compilers, and I think it's worthwhile because I've seen actually some really nice performance from them. Some things I've tried out have had much better performance with the Cray compilers than they have with GCC. So if you're interested, I'd say definitely give it a go. But something you may just want to be aware of if you do try using the Cray compilers is that there's a kind of divide here between the Fortran compiler and the C and C++ compilers. So Cray used to provide all their own software here. So Fortran, C and C++ were built from the ground up by them. The new software on these HP Cray EX machines has changed that a little. The Fortran compiler is still 100% their own, but the C and C++ compilers are actually now Clang derived. They're based on LLVM with a Cray layer, some Cray modifications on top. So some of the flags, and again you can check this. So now we've got the right compiler environment. You can do man CRAY-CC, and here it tells us that we're looking at the manual for Clang, the Cray, Clang, C, C++, UPC, and HIP compiler. And we can check options here. And if you've used Clang, you'll see that some of these options are indeed Clang-like, with some extra special Cray options on top of them. And we're very nearly at the end, which is great. So I think we'll have just about made up time from earlier. I mentioned linking earlier briefly. So yes, so particularly if you worked on Archer, Archer used static linking for everything. On ARCHER2, everything is dynamic now, and that's the only supported way of linking. So if you try to build statically, you'll find that it does not work, and you'll get some possibly quite nasty error messages to go along with them. But it's a sort of you may or may not have come across things like run paths and dar paths before. So although the linking is dynamic, at runtime, LD runs and it loads the correct correct libraries, correct .so libraries to use with your applications. But the way it finds them is through this run path. So the run path is the field that exists in, or rather can exist in the ELF headers in binaries. So whether it's an application or a library, it's just a little bit of binary written into the top of the file. And it's got a field name, which is run path. And this run path exists there. And when the time comes to run that executable or library, that's checked. And if the run path is there, it will go and look at the location. The run path is a directory. It will check in that directory and see if the library that it's talking about is there, and if so, it will use it to run that executable. So all of the HP Cray software libraries, when you build against them using CC or FTN, they all add these libraries locations into the executable's run paths. So you don't need to load programming environments or modules into your job submission scripts or into the environment if you run it interactively, because the locations of any libraries needed, of any Cray libraries needed, are already baked into the binary. And so using that, the LD is able to find them and load them. However, this is so in that way, it's kind of like a sort of halfway point between static linking and dynamic linking, because, well, the libraries are loaded dynamically at runtime, but the locations of the libraries are there baked into the executable. But because it's what's called a run path, there's a similar concept called an R path that I won't talk about just now. But because it's a run path, that means that any libraries which are in LD library path will actually have precedence over the run path libraries. So if you built your library, so if you built your executable against, say, a particular version of Cray HDF5, and you ran it, then when the time comes to run it, it would look in the run path section of your application binary and see the location of the libraries that it needs to load to do that, and it would use that version of Cray HDF5. But if you decided that you wanted to use a different version of Cray HDF5, what you can then do is you can then load that Cray HDF5 module and then run this command to add those LD library paths to add the library paths from Cray LD library path into LD library path. And at that point, those libraries from the different version have precedence over the ones baked into it. So you can change it if you want. You can go from this sort of slightly odd halfway between static and dynamic linking to full-on dynamic linking. At the same time, because this is all part of this big Cray software ecosystem that works together like this, anything that's outside it doesn't work this way. So any of the libraries provided by the CSC team from the modules, but because they're installed by us, they don't tie into that system in that way. So they are not going to be captured into the run path. So if you use, say, Boost, which is one of the libraries we've installed, then you would need to load that anytime that you want to run the application, because those run paths aren't in the binary. Just to finish things off, the Architude documentation, we've seen it a couple of points. We do have a lot on here about using various libraries. Here's, I don't know, just the stuff about Adios, if you want to use Adios, or if you want to know about using a particular piece of research software. Let's just look at Vector++, for example. If you plan on using these, all that information is there in the documentation, along with things like sample job scripts. And if you do have any issues, we run the service desk. You can always, please feel free to get in touch with us if you need any help with anything, whether that's building software or things aren't running, or any help at all with using the system. You can get in touch with us and we'll be able to help you out. So yes, so our key points for that session, I guess, we've seen about using the LMod system to use modules to control our development environment, to use different versions of libraries and compilers. We've seen about the GCC Cray compilers. The AMD compilers are there as well. I think support is a little patchier on them. We've seen how we should use the ftn, cc, and cc wrapper commands to use the compilers, because they then tie all of the Cray software together to something which works rather well, I think. And finally, if you have any issues with software development, or indeed anything else on Archer2, you can get in touch with the service desk and if it's a sort of if it's a software development like issue, you'll be probably patched through to the CSE service, who can help you with your issues, with whatever issues you might be having. Okay, does anyone have any questions at this point? Please put your hand up if you want to talk, or just type in the chat. Okay, I think we're good then. So we can go on. We've got another break now of 15 minutes. That means we will be back at what? At 14:40. Yes. Okay, so we'll take a 15-minute break, stretch our legs and look out of the window, something other than a screen 30 centimeters away. Okay, great. Thanks, William. Okay, fantastic. So I'll see you all again then in 15 minutes time at 14:40.